What is the benefit of investing in 19th century energy rather than 21st century renewable energy sources that would create permanent jobs? Yeah, I agree with that 100%. We should be investing in 21st century renewable energy sources, and I'd love to see the stuff come online sooner, not later. I'd like to see our government do more to encourage it. But the fact of the matter is, and I think everybody here knows it, is that petroleum is the primary source of energy on this planet, and even if we switch to wind and solar, we wouldn't be able to do it and supply the energy needs for quite some time. So, yeah, it's our industrial societies and the way we operate on this planet that drives oil companies. And so I agree 100%. We tried to put a solar array out on our farm, but the tax incentives were removed that made it totally impractical to do it. Okay, here's a long question. Considering the Class 1 injection well in Ashtabula and the resulting earthquake swarm, what is the likelihood of Youngstown quakes continuing for 7 to 10 years after the well here is shut down? And given our local geology, what is the most likely distance that quakes will migrate in that time frame? Boy, if we knew the answers to these questions, we'd be really well off. The likelihood of earthquakes continuing, I think, is fairly high. For 7 to 10 years, I don't know. I would hope not. That the well hadn't been receiving injection for that long, so it takes a while for the pressure front to dissipate. And so I would hope that in, 6 months' time, you see earthquake activity go back to what it was before, nothing. But we can't predict. If we could predict that kind of stuff about earthquakes, California would probably have triple the population it has right now. And the likely distance that the quakes will migrate, they haven't migrated very far. They're very localized in nature. So I'm getting a big stack here. Hang on. Since the fall under Youngstown was previously unknown and understudied, what assurances can you give that other deep injection wells like the D&H well or the D&O well on Salt Springs Road won't trigger other unknown faults? I don't think you can give any assurances. I think the best thing you can do is continue to monitor the wells, and let's face it, with 176 wells out there operating and one of them is causing trouble, I don't think that really is a big problem, personally. I think we've got one bad well, and I think the fact that the other wells haven't given us trouble is probably a good testimony to why the federal EPA gave Ohio control over their wells. And so there aren't any assurances, it's just continued diligence and how you construct the wells. And as far as the fault being understudied, I take exception to the term understudied. I would love, as a geologist, to have the federal government and other agencies pour billions of dollars into our universities to study the living daylights out of this stuff, but it's just not a reality. So it's not that it's understudied, it's that the resources to do it aren't there. How many more earthquakes can we expect to have from this fault? And are they likely to be bigger, smaller, about the same? Again, you can't predict this stuff. I think the 4.0 in Ohio is rather extraordinary. There's only 2 quakes in Ohio that have been larger. The biggest one being the Anna quake out in the 1930s in western Ohio. And so we don't have the same types of stresses operating in the rocks like you have in tectonically active areas like California and Japan. And so you never expect to have earthquakes of that magnitude. But then again, New Madrid, Missouri in the early 1800s had a rather large earthquake before we had seismographs. So anything's possible. I hope I know when I get to the top of the stack again. How will all these wells be regulated if there are only 30 inspectors for Ohio, especially when 15 of them are only part-time employees? Clearly we need more regulators in Ohio, there's no doubt about it. And if you go to the ODNR Mineral Resource Management website, they're advertising for these. Okay, regarding injection wells, if Sunday's Bindi is accurate, Vindicator? the most logical place, that was a bad joke, I'm sorry. The most logical place for brine is western and central Ohio because of the porosity of our rock formations here in eastern Ohio. Yeah, Definitely, western and central Ohio has more porous formations, no doubt about it. But the other thing is that as you get towards central Ohio, those formations become much more shallow. And so the very deep igneous and metamorphic rocks are about 2,000 feet below the surface rather than 9,000 feet below the surface. And so that's the flip side of the problem, is your injection ends up being shallow. So the Vindicator is pretty accurate on that. It's just the depth is something you have to watch. If we felt all the earthquakes last year, is our home the most susceptible to damage if they start up the injection wells in a 5-mile radius of our home? Okay, let me think about that. I think obviously in this area, because we've established earthquakes and we know the locations of the earthquakes, this area remains susceptible to earthquakes. And it'd be nice if we could predict when they would stop. But it's pretty well established that after you stop injection, it doesn't mean earthquake activity stops immediately along with it. So it's a pressure front out into the rocks that has to dissipate.